What we're going to do is we're going to solve these quadratics by using the square root. We can use the square root because we don't have multiple x's. We have an x squared. What we're going to be doing the next couple days is solving quadratics where we have an x squared and an x. And so we'll be completing the square and the quadratic formula. But when we have a simple x squared, what we can do is we can solve using square roots. Our first step is we're going to get the x squared by itself by subtracting the 5. And we get x squared is equal to negative 16. Once the x squared is by itself, we're going to do the opposite operation of squaring something, which is a square root. Now, one thing that we always have to remember is that when we do a square root, there's a positive root and a negative root. And the reason why is because when we square something, we're not sure if it's negative 4 squared, which is giving us the 16, or if it's 4 squared giving us the 16, because both of them equal 16. So we're not sure if it's the positive root and the negative root, so we have to put both of them. That's why there's a plus or a minus. Now, negative 16 is 16 and negative 1. We know the square root of 16 is 4, and we know the square root of negative 1 is I. So our answer is plus or minus 4i. Now with the letter B, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add the 3, and we get 2x squared is equal to negative 100. We divide it by 2, and we get x squared is equal to negative 50. Now we're going to do the opposite operation. So we're taking the square root, and what makes up 50 is 25, 2, and negative 1. So our answer is plus or minus. We have to remember the positive root and the negative root. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of negative 1 is I. And then we're going to put square root of 2. Now, looking at letter C, process is the same. We want to get the x squared by itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the 8, and we get 3x squared is equal to negative 7. We divide it by 3, and that gives us x squared is equal to negative 7 over 3. Now, in order to get rid of the square, we're doing the opposite operation, which is the square root. The problem is that we have a denominator, and we can't have a square root in the denominator, so what we do is we rationalize it. So we're multiplying the top and the bottom by the square root of 3. And what that gives us, we know that negative gives us an I. We know 7 times 3 is 21. And 3 times 3 is 9. And we know the square root of 9 is 3. You could either put the I in the front, or you could put it in the back right here. I'm just going to leave it in the front. Actually, I'm going to put it in the back right here. Don't put it underneath the square root, because then it looks like a part of it. And the one thing I did miss is that I forgot my positive root and my negative root. So I want to make sure that I remember that. Now, looking at letter D, this is a little bit different because we have the x in parentheses. This is really an x squared right here. A lot of students, they'll see this and they'll want to FOIL it. You could actually solve it foiling, but it makes it a lot more difficult. What we're going to do is we're going to get the parentheses by itself. So we're going to add the 1. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to get rid of the squared. So just like the previous ones, we're taking the square root, and what we get is x plus 2. We have to remember a positive and negative root, and we get 4. So in order to get the x by itself, we subtract the 2. Now, this is important because since there's a positive and negative root, we're going to do the positive 4 first. 4 minus 2 is 2. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do the negative 2. And with the negative 2, what we have is negative 4 minus 2, which is negative 6. So looking at letter E, our first step is subtracting the 9. Then what we do is we divide it by 2. And now what we do is we take the square root and we get x minus 3 equals, we got to remember our positive and negative root. What makes up 8 is 4 and 2 and negative 1. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of negative 1 is I. So we have 2i and then square root of 2. We're going to add the 3. Now, these are not like terms. One is a real number. The other one is an imaginary number. So we're going to leave it as 3 plus or minus 2i square root of 2. Now, looking at letter F, the process is the same. We're first going to subtract the 20. We get the 3x plus 5 squared is equal to negative 17. We divide it by 3. We get x plus 5 squared is equal to negative 17 over 3. Once again, we want to get rid of the squared by taking the square root. And because there's a denominator, what we're going to do is we're going to rationalize it. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 3. Remember, the square root of a negative is I. So I'm going to put my positive and negative root. I'm going to put my I. 17 times 3 gives me 51. And 3 times 3 is 9, which is 3. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the 5. So my final answer is x equals plus x equals negative 5 plus or minus I square root of 51 over 3. Okay, let's look at these next 3. These are similar. So I would pause the video and try it on your own and then see how you do. But let's look at G. G is going to be fairly simple because all we have to do is add the 8 in order to get the x squared by itself. Then we do the opposite operation and we get x equals, remember the plus or minus, we know that 52 is 4 and 13 and negative 1. So that gives us 2i square root of 13. Now looking at letter H, a couple steps here. We subtract the 20. Next step is we divide it by 7. We take the square root and we notice that we have to rationalize it. So we multiply the top and the bottom by 7. That gives us a positive and negative root. The negative tells us there's an I. 11 times 7 gives us 77. 7 times 7 is 49, which we know the square root of is 7. And for our last one, we're going to subtract the 8. We divide it by 2. We take the square root. We have to remember to put our positive and negative. That's a negative, so we know there's an I. 7 doesn't simplify, so when we subtract the 3, we put our real number in the front, which is the 3, our imaginary number in the back, our normal a plus bi form, our standard form, I square root of 7. And that right there would be our answer.